Okay, so I got my package of cheese over here, away from the rats. So I should be able to eat up this cheese and... Caution. The following video is an in-depth review of the movie I'm currently reviewing, which means that there will be massive spoilers in the review. If you haven't seen this movie yet, then please feel free to watch this movie first before watching this video. However, if you have already seen this movie, or you just want to know my thoughts on this movie, then keep watching. So for many years, I have been watching many darker, edgier takes on classic fairy tales. I've watched many dark versions of Little Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, and The Three Little Pigs, to name a few. But out of all of those fairy tales, I rarely seen any remakes on the Pied Piper of Hamelin. The Pied Piper of Hamelin was a classic fairy tale from Germany, and it was basically about the town of Hamelin being invaded by a swarm of rats. One day, a mysterious stranger called the Pied Piper comes to town and promises to get rid of the rats if the townspeople promise to pay him money for his services. Once the Pied Piper used his magical flute to drive the rats away from Hamelin, he goes to the townspeople to receive his payment, but they refuse to pay him. This then led to the Pied Piper using his flute once again, but this time it's to lead the children of Hamelin away from the town and into an unknown place. It was then that the children were never seen again after this. Pretty grim story, right? Well, as I mentioned before, I rarely heard about any remakes being made about this classic tale, until I stumbled upon a fellow YouTuber's video who happened to be Steve Reviews, and I saw his review on the movie, and I was like, this looks like an interesting movie. I should check it out. So I did, and man, do I have a lot of thoughts about this movie. So the Pied Piper, also known as Krysar, was a Czechoslovakian stop-motion animated film directed by Jiří Barta, and it was well known as a much darker, edgier version of the classic fairy tale. But before I go into what I liked and hated about this film, I would like to give a brief summary of this film. The film starts off with the townspeople of Hamelin doing their jobs and other activities, but unfortunately it turns out that the people of Hamelin are actually greedy and selfish people who only care about the materialistic things in life. One day, however, when the townspeople ended up wasting so much food and items, it caused a rat infestation to take place, and the rats ended up taking over the town of Hamelin. At that moment, a mysterious stranger called the Pied Piper comes to the town of Hamelin, and the town leaders promise to pay the Piper 1,000 gold coins if he gets rid of the rats. The Pied Piper accepts the terms, and he starts playing his flute, which mind controls the rats into following him out of the town and jumping into the river where they all drowned. Meanwhile, doing all of this, the jeweler, who is a part of the town leaders, was trying to woo a woman, who was not as corrupt as the other townspeople and was actually an innocent person. However, the innocent woman was not in love with the jeweler, and she instead falls in love with the Pied Piper himself. Afterwards, the Pied Piper goes back to the town leaders to receive his payment, but the town leaders refuse to pay him, and the Pied Piper ends up leaving them in anger. It was after that moment that things started to get worse for the townspeople of Hamelin. The Pied Piper was a very unique and dark film for me. I've stated before that I've seen a lot of darker retellings of classic fairy tales, but I've never seen any quite like this one. For one thing, this film goes beyond what you would expect in a darker, edgier take on a classic fairy tale. This film actually has some violence, some sexual material, and an alternate ending to the original classic fairy tale that is so dark that it darkens the skies. And I would definitely get into my thoughts about the ending soon enough. So let's talk about what I did like about this film. The first thing that I really liked about this film was the darker, edgier tone of the movie. As I mentioned before, this film got pretty violent at times, and it just had a much gloomier atmosphere. Even though in some versions of the Pied Piper story where the town of Hamelin was full of corrupted people, this film really shows how disturbing and horrifying it could be to live in a town full of greedy and corrupted people. Like, for example, the town leaders are so corrupted that they themselves will perform horrible acts on the townspeople just to get what they want. And the townspeople themselves are so greedy that they will constantly fight each other when the opportunity presents itself. This creates a sense of dread when you think about how a normal person would survive in a town like Hamelin if it's being overrun by greedy and selfish people who would hurt that person to get what they want. Another dark aspect of this film is the violence and the sexual situations. In the original fairy tale, there was barely any kind of violence to be had, except for the deaths of the rats themselves. Here in this film, we get to see the rats themselves drown on screen, and we even get some scenes of the rats being beaten up to a bloody pulp, to the rats giving bloody scratches to some of the townspeople. Honestly, I was a bit shocked at how violent this film got, even though I should have expected this film to be dark because of how the film looked. Speaking of how the film looks, let's talk about the overall design of this film. According to director Jiří Barta, the designs of the city and the characters themselves are based on German Expressionism and medieval German art. For those of you who are wondering what this means, German Expressionism was an expressionist movement in North and Central European culture in fields such as architecture, dance, painting, sculpture, and cinema. The movement started before the First World War and reached its peak in Berlin during the 1920s. Now that I think about it, it would make sense to make the designs of this movie based on German Expressionism, since the original fairy tale did originate in Germany. Anyway, the designs of the building and the people themselves look very bizarre and creepy, as everything looks so distorted and bleak. The townspeople themselves have a wooden look to them, which greatly conveys their mechanical movements whenever they are doing their daily routines in the town. Now, the rats, on the other hand, are shown in a much more realistic manner than the townspeople. Once again, according to director Jiří Barta, the rats were designed in a more realistic way to show that they are more alive than the humans themselves. This is really showcased when some scenes show the rats in live action, and even when the rats themselves are animated, they are still shown to be more realistic looking than the humans themselves. Heck, the humans actually move like they are machines, while the rats are moving in a more organic manner. This makes me wonder about why the rats are shown to be more realistic looking than the humans themselves. Maybe it's because that even though the rats did cause problems for the town of Hamelin, they were only rummaging through the town's storage out of need for survival, while the townspeople themselves were hoarding their items out of greed. This definitely shows a stark difference between the townspeople and the rats, as the townspeople seem like the real monsters of the story rather than the rats themselves. I mean, check out this scene. Take a guess at who's making that animalistic growling noise, and it's not the little rodent. Another thing that I liked about this film was the animation itself. The animation is of course done as stop motion animation, and I was impressed with how jerky the characters' movements were, as it made these characters seem very unnatural. Also, because this film doesn't really have any dialogue from the characters, as the characters are mumbly for the most part, the animation itself shows us the events of the story in fluid detail. So now that I talked about the design of the movie and the parallels between the townspeople and the rats, let's talk about the characters themselves, or at least the main characters. The biggest character that I wanted to talk about is the Pied Piper himself. This interpretation of the Pied Piper was a pretty interesting take on the character. Usually whenever you read about the Pied Piper in the original fairy tale, he's usually portrayed as a jester-like character who looks jolly for the most part. Here, however, the Pied Piper looks like a scary-looking drifter with menacing eyes. I absolutely love this design of the Pied Piper, because not only does he look pretty awesome, but it fits in so well with the dark tone of this movie. And if you are going to have a darker, edgier interpretation of the classic Pied Piper story, then you need to make your main character have a sinister appearance as well. I also love the fact that whenever the Pied Piper appears on screen, a rock guitar riff sounds off, which definitely made his character really stand out from the other characters. Also, the Pied Piper's personality in this film was quite mysterious. He pretty much just comes into the film when the rats start invading Hamelin, and we really don't know anything about his character. However, I do like the fact that the Pied Piper does have a softer side to himself, as we see that he does care for the innocent woman in the film, which I will get more into her character later on. It does give the Pied Piper some depth to his character, even if it's only shown for a few seconds. Also, his revenge against the townspeople is much darker here than in the original fairy tale. So I would have to warn you guys that there will be some massive spoilers at this point, though with all my reviews to my old videos, there will always be spoilers. So just like in the original fairy tale, the town leaders refuse to pay the Pied Piper for his services, and to make matters worse, the innocent woman ends up being murdered. Because of all this, the Pied Piper decided to take his revenge against the townspeople by using his flute and transforming all the townspeople into rats, and forcing them to jump into the river where they all drown. Wow, things got dark pretty fast, didn't they? Even though the Pied Piper taking the children away in the original fairy tale was bad enough, I was beyond shocked to see this ending. I never would have expected the Pied Piper to transform the townspeople into rats and then force them to go into the river to drown. But the upside to this ending is that at least the children didn't get punished. I will admit that when I read the original fairy tale, I was a bit put off by the fact that the children were the ones who were being punished in a way by being taken away from their parents, despite the fact that it was the town leaders who didn't pay the piper. I was thinking to myself, well, why are the kids being taken away? They had nothing to do with what the town leaders did to the piper. So in a way, the Pied Piper transforming the townspeople into rats actually did punish the people who wronged him directly, instead of punishing the innocent people who had nothing to do with the treachery of the town leaders. Now let's talk about the town leaders themselves. The town leaders are probably the most corrupted characters in the entire movie. Even though the townspeople themselves are greedy and selfish people, the town leaders take on a whole new level of villainy as they indirectly caused a rat infestation, and one of them even resorted to murder. The town leaders are constantly seen gorging on large amounts of food, and because of this, the rats started invading the town of Hamelin due to all the food that the town leaders have thrown away. And later on in the film, one of the leaders, the jeweler, was trying to make moves on the innocent woman, but of course the innocent woman wasn't interested in him. This would cause the jeweler and his two companions to break into the innocent woman's house in the middle of the night and supposedly raped her and then murder her. So of course, once the Pied Piper enacts his revenge, it was quite satisfying seeing the town leaders get punished for their horrific crimes. Now let's talk about the two most innocent characters in the film, the innocent woman and the fisherman. Now in regards to the innocent woman, despite the fact that her character is a bit flat, she at least provides an interesting dynamic with the other characters in the film. She is seen as the most innocent character in the film, and unlike the other citizens of Hamelin, she doesn't care about riches, and it greatly contrasts her character with the other citizens of Hamelin. I also thought that she brought a bit more depth to the Pied Piper's character, as she takes an interest in the Pied Piper, and the Pied Piper is able to show a much softer side towards her. So when the innocent woman is murdered, it causes the Pied Piper to snap and transform all the townspeople into rats and lead them into the river to drown. The fisherman was another innocent character in the film. Even though he doesn't really do much in the movie, the fact that the Pied Piper spared him at the end of the movie actually show how his selfless nature protected him from the carnage. However, he does play an important role at the end of the film when he rescues an abandoned baby in the now empty town of Hamelin and takes the baby to a better place to live. Now, here's some issues that I have with this film, and it's honestly not that much. For one thing, the beginning of the movie was a bit too slow. For the first 25 minutes or so, we witnessed the various activities that the townspeople do, as well as showing us what kind of work the town leaders do. Like for instance, we see the jeweler selling jewelry to people, a butcher killing animals for meat, and one of the leaders selling cloth to people. We also see how the town leaders hoard the riches once they are done with their businesses. So while I do appreciate the film showing us just how greedy the townspeople were, the pacing for the whole sequence is a bit slow, and it wouldn't be until the rats come in much later that the film starts picking up the pace. Heck, the Pied Piper himself doesn't even show up in the film until 25 minutes in. And seriously, the Pied Piper literally shows up at the 25-minute mark in the movie. Another issue that I had with this film were the characters of the innocent woman and the fisherman. As I mentioned before, these two characters are the most innocent characters in the film. But unfortunately, they don't really get that much development in comparison to the Pied Piper and the town leaders themselves. Heck, both the fisherman and the innocent woman showed up at the same time as the Pied Piper himself. With the innocent woman, while I appreciate the fact that she gave the Pied Piper a softer side to himself, she's just pretty much there to be a love interest and nothing else. Man, what is it with me reviewing movies where the love interest is a completely flat character? Anyway, the worst part of the innocent woman's character is that she ended up being killed by the jeweler and his companions a few minutes after she was introduced. So we never really got the chance to learn more about her character and how she communicated with the people of Hamelin. I actually wish that she was introduced much earlier in the film so that we could see her communicate with the people of Hamelin and see how she caught the eye of the jeweler in the first place. The fisherman was another innocent character who didn't get any development. Even though the audience knows that the fisherman was innocent towards the end of the film, we barely spent any time with his character, and he was just as mysterious as the Pied Piper himself. The Pied Piper doesn't really have a rating, but it does have violent and disturbing content throughout. For one thing, there's some violent scenes in this movie, which includes the rats bloodily scratching people up and the rats themselves being drowned on screen. Also, there's a scene where it's implied that the innocent woman got raped by the jeweler and his companions, and then she is murdered. All of these scenes can be very disturbing for some viewers. Overall, I give the Pied Piper a score of a 9.8 out of 10. Even though the beginning of the movie was a bit slow, and some of the characters, mostly the innocent characters, weren't that well developed, I still really enjoyed this movie. The darker, edgier atmosphere really made this movie stand out to me, and the disturbing visual styles of the characters and the world they live in really made this a very unique film to watch. If you are looking for a darker, edgier version of the classic The Pied Piper of Hamelin fairy tale, then I highly recommend this film. Hope you enjoy my review on The Pied Piper. Now it's time for... So if you like The Pied Piper, then I would highly recommend The Snowman. Why the plot is very different is another foreign animated film that also doesn't feature any dialogue and allows the animation to do the talking. If you like the storyline about the Pied Piper falling in love with a beautiful woman who is being pursued by a corrupted official, then I highly recommend Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It features the main character Quasimodo, who is also an outcast, falling in love with the beautiful Romani girl Esmeralda, who also happens to be pursued by the evil high official, Judge Claude Frollo. And if you like another stop-motion animated film that has a similar surreal and disturbing art style, then I highly recommend The Nightmare Before Christmas. Hey guys, like this video? If you want to check out more crazy content from this channel, then please hit that big old colorful subscribe button. And if you are feeling extra generous, then please support me through Patreon so I can make more awesome content for this channel.